I'm stuck. This assignment is due at midnight, and I still have not learned a thing about Generation X. I can't hand in another assignment late to Mr. Poklecki. Oh dear, what will I do? Oh. Look, here a text from my dearest Uncle Frank. I have been meaning to reach out to him. I know his 48th birthday is coming up soon. I'll see if he wants to meet for coffee in a bit. Wow, it is so good to see you, Todd. I am glad you got my text. How have you been? I have been good. I know your 48th birthday is approaching. How are you feeling about that? I miss being young and having functioning joints. I often reminisce about my times as growing up. Of course you don't want to hear about that though. You barely respond to my texts, let alone ask to meet up. So what is going on today? Uncle Frank, I need some help with my school project. I took Challenge and Change as a fun course, but I am really stumped with this assignment. I need to understand what life was like for people born in Generation X. I know you were born in 1973, so I believe this applies to you. Can I sort of interview you? Of course you can interview me. Why didn't you ask sooner? You know I am always here to help you out. What a relief. Where should we begin? I'm so happy you chose me to be your interviewee. I was born in 1973, so I do belong to Generation X. The X is because of our desire to be undefined. I grew up in the US. Let me tell you a little bit about my past and present as a general, sir. Wow, we can surely start there. You sure know how to lead an interview, Frank. Oh, okay. It sure was great to have lived in the times of parachute pants and mixtapes. Being a General X means that you were coming of age in the 80s and 90s. Being such a rebellious and free-roaming generation without the hindrance of technology, we experienced some of the richest pop culture history to date. Wow, tell me more. All we have now are jet spinners and TikTok. The diversity of music in the 80s and 90s was influenced by the young generation's desire for pop culture superstars that rebelled against society's norms. Artists such as Prince, Kurt Cobain, Biggie and Tupac highlighted this desire to diverge from the norms and break the boundaries set by previous generations. The common denominator between all of these artists is they strived for the individualistic allure rather than be a corporate puppet. Kurt Cobain, the lead of Nirvana, defined the genre of grunge music. The grunge rock subculture exploded in popularity as the discography was synonymous with how General X felt towards the world at the time of coming of age. Bands such as Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains defined this music scene, and drew listeners from metal and rock genres as they became overplayed. Wow, so you had actual good music. Unlike what is playing on the radio in this coffee shop right now. You got that right. Hip-hop exploded in popularity with the younger generation in white suburbia, with the 80s often referred to as the golden age of hip-hop. The East and West Coast had incredibly well-established names that were synonymous with hip-hop such as Biggie, Tupac, N.W.A., Run DMC and the Wu-Tang Clan. What about fashion? What was that like? Oh yes, you cannot forget about fashion. Fashion was intertwined with the music trends at the times. Just like your generation, it was definitely influenced by comfort and sensibility, with flannels, loose-fitting gender-neutral garments and athletic wear for all occasions, sneakers in particular. Me and my friends had bullets, box cuts, shag hairstyles, and mohawks. For women it was all about perms, bangs, big bombshell styles and symmetrical bob cuts. Wow, hearing you talk, I wish I was born as a member of Generation X. The music was good, fashion made sense and self-expression was at an all-time high. What is there not to love? Growing up in the 80s wasn't all fun haircuts and funky style. There were many trials and tribulations of the times. General Xers lived under the threat of nuclear war for a memorable portion of our younger years, and even had to go through drills at school in case of nuclear attack. The AIDS epidemic swept the world and stigmatized gay men. Without ample research done and shared with the public, many folks were scared that they might contract this disease from coming in proximity of someone who had AIDS, which we now know how far from the truth that is. In October of 1987, the stock market crashed, leaving the world in recession until the recovery of the economy in 1993. Oh wow, I am so sorry, Uncle. I will make sure to include that in my presentation for my peers. Good idea. It's important that they do not get the wrong impression and believe that coming of age during the 80s and 90s was a piece of cake. Our generational cohort was bombarded with employment and academic pressures by our parents. We were pushed towards getting an education, working an orthodox job and starting a family. Then we were told that we would be happy and satisfied with ourselves. This seemingly forced future did not sit well with us and we rebelled from their social expectations. Haha, silly boomers. Boomers suck lol. Yeah, being born from 1964 to 1980 meant both parents were entering the workforce as women were becoming more included both politically and economically. This meant less adult supervision and more peer orientation. We also experienced the rise of the computer, which made us more entrepreneurial than our parents. I have heard that many refer to Generation X as the latchkey generation. Do you know why this is? Latchkey. Ha 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 ha. Good question. I think this is because as we were growing up when both of our parents were at work, we would come home from school and have to use the latchkey to let ourselves inside and wait for our parents to return home from work. Growing up within this kind of dynamic definitely bred independent, self-reliant people. Having grown up witnessing the tensions between the Soviet Union and the US marked by the fall of the Berlin Wall. Out of necessity, we learned to be flexible to adapt to drastic social changes. We grew up in a period of great division. Between the Watergate scandal and the Vietnam War, we had to learn to think critically about the world around us. Isn't it crazy that your generation was the first to grow up after the civil rights movement? You grew up with ideas of equality and diversity and witnessed the birth of the computer. I am sorry, Uncle, but I still think I would have rather been a teen in your time. It certainly was a cool time, but you have to remember a lot of parents were separating at this time. Divorce rates were through the roof and children at this time like your father and I struggled as a result. Oh yes. Could you speak about working an orthodox job and that forced future? Again, I really think this perspective is necessary to focus on in my project. We are the first generational cohort to experience a labor market that demands post-secondary education for economic success. And to this change, our generation responded with higher educational attainment. So what does this mean? While many believe that Generation X is more financially secure than the generation of our parents, it actually meant that we are faced with high amounts of debt. Wow. This all sounds so fascinating, but also very daunting. Do you think my generation will face the same obstacles? Hopefully not, dear nephew. You see, General Xers have led the charge in many of society's transformative changes over the last 5 decades. Those video games that you and your friends spend all day playing? Well, we did it first and made them better. Growing up in the 70s and 80s, many teenagers were glued to their new electronic games on electronic devices. Today we have seen firsthand what innovation can do. The invention and desire for electronic games have spiraled into entire powerful industries which have created not only easier access to at-home entertainment, but also many new job opportunities. You see, my nephew, General Xers, grew up watching their parents live their lives with a work-to-live mindset. They were workaholics, which often left them absent when it came to providing emotional parental support. So, my friends and I had to make do with what we had, and electronic gaming was a way to combat our pervasive loneliness. Uncle Frank, this is such helpful information. You are an amazing interviewee. Do you think that my generation and yours share anything in common? Well, according to American authors William Strauss and Neil Howe, they looked at how over time each generation's characteristics and the cycle of what happens in that generation repeats again and again. Their study lists 4 archetypes or universal patterns, and the generational values alternate between 4 distinct eras called turnings. There are 4 turnings: prophet, nomad, hero and artist generations. Over time, each of these turnings became popular and then made way for the next. General X is a part of the nomad archetypes. For example, famous General Sir Elon Musk builds things that move us from one place to another: rockets, electric cars, nomadic devices. Nomads grow up as underprotected children, such as General X latchkey kids, and in entering adult life attack the established institutional order. Nomads are also described as a reactive recessive generation, meaning that when institutions are weak and distrusted, individualism flourishes. So nothing? I wouldn't say that. The world has yet to shape your generation and leave its mark. Only time will tell whether your generation makes or breaks Strauss and Howe's generational theory. Thank you again, Frank, for your time today. Oh, and happy early birthday. I will let you know how the project goes. No problem, my dearest nephew. Good luck. Phew. Submitted. Done. Now it is time to eat potato chip and listen to my favorite podcast ever with my favorite person ever, Tristan Harris. Oh wow, the newest episode is about QAnon. I can't wait. Written by Irmdrad, Olivia and Jacob.